How does the Israeli-Iranian war fit into Bible prophecy? Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. That's what we're going to talk about today. What are the prophetic implications of this war? Now, short answer is, well, we can't really know until it all plays out. However, given our observations of what we see happening and our knowledge of the times in which we live, we can envision certain scenarios taking place, and we can see the direction that these events are moving in. So based on that, we can outline several scenarios of possibly what can happen based on what the Bible tells us about these times in which we live. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's start with what the current conflict is not. It is not, and I'll firmly stand behind this. This is not the Ezekiel 38-39 Gog of Magog invasion that we read about in the Bible. It is not, regardless of if Russia comes to Iran's aid, this is not that conflict, because that conflict has a precondition to it. And that precondition is Israel dwelling in a state of peace and tranquility. So let's take a look right here. This specific verse, Ezekiel 38, verse 11. It says, "You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars." So this is the "you will say" is the leader of the Gog of Magog invaders. And again, we don't see this state in existence right now. An unsuspecting people, Israel would not be unsuspecting right now of an attack or an invasion. And let's go down and look at the original language, because there's all sorts of different English translations. So we should always turn to the original language if we really want to know, get an idea of what specifically we should be looking for here. And so when we go in and we look at this land of unwalled villages, a tranquil people, quiet or undisturbed. Guys, this does not describe Israel in any way, shape, or form since 1948. The modern day nation state of Israel has not been a tranquil people in the last 77 years. It just has not. So a precondition to the Gog of Magog invasion is this state of tranquility, the state of peace. Now, I think the aftermath of what we're seeing right now is highly likely to put Israel in that place of peace and tranquility. So I believe what we're seeing is a setup to the Gog of Magog war, and that it will create those conditions of peace and security and the sense of tranquility, a sense that the existential threats to Israel have vanished, and that will set the stage for Gog of Magog to take place probably several years in the future, but not right now. So, if that's the case, well, what should we expect next? I think there's two scenarios, because it's been made very clear, I believe, in the last several days, if it wasn't clear before, that the object of this war, from Israel's standpoint and the United States standpoint, and we'll talk about, God willing, we'll talk about this more in an article I'll put out on the Substack tomorrow, because I think this is important to understand. The objective of this war at this point, from Israel and the United States standpoint, is regime change. Now, they may focus on carrying that about. They may try to negotiate a ceasefire in the meantime while they try to carry out efforts to lead to that regime change. But their objective is regime change in Iran. And so, scenario one, they have that. They achieve that. We see some sort of immediate regime change in Iran. Terror funding of all these proxy groups that surround Israel disappears. We see other nations in the region normalize relations with Israel, such as Saudi Arabia. We have a new regime in Iran that normalizes relations with Israel, and we end up getting this seemingly tranquil, peaceful state where the existential threats that Israel has faced since 1948 seemingly disappear. They go away, they vanish. And it creates the conditions for Ezekiel 38:39. I think eventually that's most likely what we will see. However, I believe there's a second scenario that's more likely, and more likely based on what we observe in the real world, as well as, most importantly, what the Bible has to say about the times in which we live. I believe there's an intermediate step here. So one of the problems that I think we have right now is there are a lot of people, a lot of pro-Israel, pro-America people that are declaring victory, and they've declared victory prematurely. Because as I just stated, I believe the objective, the overriding goal of this conflict from Israel's standpoint and the United States standpoint is not simply to eliminate Iran's nuclear program. They claim that that objective has been achieved, but as long as the Iranian regime remains in place, they will continue those efforts. Maybe they've been set back several years, who knows? But as long as the Iranian regime remains in place, well, then they have not fully achieved that objective, because those efforts to achieve a bomb will probably accelerate in the aftermath of this. So I believe the goal of the United States and Israel now is to eliminate the Iranian regime, replace it with a new one. So given that, and knowing that Iran knows that, well, this war is not over just because people declare that it is, and that the United States, Israel have air supremacy, Iran is weak, Iran is defenseless, what can they do? We're hearing a lot of that, and while Iran is weakened, that is true. It is not true to say that they are powerless, that they have no options. That is a very dangerous assumption to make. So we had a live stream last night on the YouTube channel where we talked a little bit about this and some of the options that Iran has at its disposal. And I said at that time, it's really reminded me Saturday night, some of the celebrations that were going on reminded me in a lot of ways of a scene from Gone with the Wind, where Clark Gable's character, Rhett Butler, he's in the parlor before the war begins with all these Southern gentlemen smoking their cigars, and they're saying, well, we're going to roll right over the North. This war will be over in a matter of weeks. It'll be over in a matter of months at most. And he asked, how many of you have actually been to the North? I have. They're not as weak as you think they are. And of course, I'm not saying that Iran is going to defeat Israel. Obviously, they will not. The Bible is very clear. Israel is back in the land. The Jewish people back in the nation state of Israel, never to be uprooted again. That's what the Bible says. Israel will not be destroyed, vanquished, thrown into the sea. None of the things Israel's enemies say about her will come true. God is on Israel's side. God has made a promise. Israel will be there, and Israel will be there. However, we read things in the Bible that there are some intermediate steps, I believe, before we get to this sense of tranquility, peace, and security that we read about in Ezekiel 38:11. And again, I think Iran has many options at their disposal that we talked about. We see them continuing to send missiles toward Israel. So that could continue, and while the overwhelming majority of those are being intercepted, many are still getting through and causing damage. We see options that they have to attack oil production facilities in the Middle East, to harass shipping in the Persian Gulf, much as the Houthis have in the Red Sea, and to shut down oil traffic going through the Strait of Hormuz. That would cause massive economic damage to Israel, the United States, and their allies, the whole world, frankly. So there's a lot of options here. And there's even bigger attack options that I think people may miss. So again, to think about an analogy, perhaps, For those who know their World War II history, think about the Battle of the Bulge. And if you're not aware of that, go look that up. Go read about that. So the Battle of the Bulge took place in December 1944 to January 1945. My grandfather actually fought in that battle as well. But at that time, if you go back to early December 1944, well, the war was essentially over. But it wasn't over, right? So many people had declared victory. Well, by Christmas, by January, the Germans will surrender. This will be over. Germany was essentially defeated. There was no way for them to win the war if the Soviet Union, the United States, and the United Kingdom continued to press forward in attacking Germany. There's no way for them to win. And so people sort of became comfortable with that idea, and then they were caught by a surprise attack through the Ardennes that led to the Battle of the Bulge. So while Germany was weakened, while their defeat was inevitable, they still had firepower available that they used, and they made enormous gains over the course of a few weeks. Now, they couldn't sustain those. And that was known before they launched it. It was known by Germany's generals. But you had Hitler and a number of ideologues in power that weren't going to go down. They weren't going to surrender. They were going to they were going to cause as much destruction as they could if they knew they were going down. I believe the same is true in Iran today. We're going to see those in power in that regime saying, we're not going to just surrender. We're going to destroy as much as we can on the way out if we're going down at all. And I don't know that they necessarily think that they're going down, but they know that that's the aim of the United States and Israel. And so this war is not over until the Iranian regime falls. And so before we see that peace scenario, and one with the Iranian regime falls, all the terror funding in the Middle East goes away, or at least substantial amounts of that terror funding go away. We see normalization of relations with all the countries of the Middle East and Israel, and we see the existential threats to Israel seemingly disappear and peaceful, tranquil conditions take over. I believe we're looking at a Battle of the Bulge type surge possibility in the intermediate term. And we've talked before about these passages. So I believe Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 are highly likely to be fulfilled between now and the Ezekiel 38-39 Gog of Magog invasion. Now, before we talk about these, there are people who are knowledgeable, Bible scholars, brilliant people, great Christians who believe that those passages are not prophecies of future events, and that's fine. I hold a different point of view, and I'm going to explain that in today's video. Talked about it in the past. So I fully admit I could be wrong in this interpretation, but I don't think I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't have that interpretation. So we're going to talk about that today, what that means. So let's take a look at Psalm 83 and what we read there. So again, this is a psalm of Asaph. Now, those who don't believe this is a prophecy say, well, this is an imprecatory prayer. It's not meant to be prophetic in nature, but we do know that Asaph is a prophet. He's referred to as a prophet in the New Testament. And we're going to look at the end of this as to why I believe this prayer is answered by God in Isaiah 17. And how these two events, I believe, these passages are linked together and point to our day and time. So this says, O God, do not be silent. Do not be deaf. Do not be quiet, O God. Don't you hear the uproar of your enemies? Don't you see that your arrogant enemies are rising up? They devise crafty schemes against your people. They conspire against your precious ones. Come, they say, let us wipe out Israel as a nation. We will destroy the very memory of its existence. That's exactly what we've heard since 1948 from the enemies of Israel, those surrounding Israel. It says, yes, this was their unanimous decision. They signed a treaty as allies against you, these Edomites and Ishmaelites, Moabites, Hagrites, Gebalites, Ammonites, and Amalekites, and people from Philistia and Tyre. Assyria has joined them too and is allied with the descendants of Lot. So who are all of these groups? Well, years ago, I wrote a piece on this where we outlined what are those modern day geographic locations today. So you'll see certain themes cropping up. Jordan, parts of what's called the West Bank, the Arab people, Jordan, West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, Southern Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, parts of Turkey and Iraq. Again, so keep in mind all of those nation states because that's going to crop back up in a second when we finish reading those. So it says, do to them as you did to the Midianites, and as you did to Sisera and Jabin at the Kishon River. They were destroyed at Endor, and their decaying corpses fertilized the soil. Let their mighty nobles die as Oreb and Zeeb did. Let all their princes die like Zebah and Zalmunna, for they said, let us seize for our own use these pasture lands of God. Again, the exact same things we hear today. Oh my God, scatter them like tumbleweed, like chaff before the wind. As a fire burns a forest and as a flame sets mountains ablaze, chase them with your fierce storm, terrify them with your tempest. Utterly disgrace them until they submit to your name, O Lord. Let them be ashamed and terrified forever. Let them die in disgrace. Then they will learn that you alone are called the Lord, that you alone are the Most High, supreme over all the earth. So let's remember what this prayer is right here, because we're going to revisit this in just a moment. But first, again, all of these nations we just talked about, or all of these people groups and locations, this is what we see. So this is a Newsweek article from a year ago, almost a year ago anyway. And it says, Israel's war with Iran on 7 fronts. And so what are those 7 fronts they list in this Newsweek article? Well, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Iran. Okay, and so if we go back here, other than Yemen and Iran, which we already know they're at war with those groups right now, these are the peoples described in Psalm 83. And so, yes, over the past year since this article was written, many of those proxy groups, many of those terror groups have been substantially weakened. We've seen assaults on Hezbollah. We've seen assaults on Hamas. But the idea that they are completely vanquished and wiped out, I believe, is a very dangerous assumption. Now, again, Israel and the United States have complete air superiority to be able to destroy conventional air bases where you have an airstrip and a bunch of enemy airplanes lined up. There's no threat from that type of conventional warfare. But drones and missiles, even weapons of mass destruction, can be hidden inside neighborhoods and homes all throughout the West Bank, Lebanon, Gaza, all these places. Even with all the assaults that have taken place, again, it's a dangerous assumption to assume all of those threats are completely gone, even if, like the Americans in 1944, you say, well, this war is over. It's just a matter of time. And then you wake up one day and there's a surprise attack with a lot of force behind it. A lot of this, we haven't seen the force we were promised from Iran and its proxies over many years of talk about the buildup of Hezbollah, all these terrorist groups. Have they simply been wiped out? Let's hope so, but we don't know that for sure. And what happens if we see a surprise assault coordinated by all of these groups. We can't discount that. And it leads to intermediate pain that many people don't anticipate because they've prematurely declared victory. Let's read this as well from Isaiah 17. So this says, "This message came to me concerning Damascus." And again, there are people who believe that this was fulfilled back in 722 BC to 732 BC time frame. Certainly they could be right. I'll talk in a moment about why I think that's not fully the case. So it says, "Look, the city of Damascus will disappear." So right off the bat, the city of Damascus is widely considered the longest continuously inhabited city on the planet. With history we can trace back over 5,000 years. So the city of Damascus has not disappeared. It did not disappear in 722 BC. It's still around. People still live in it. So that's why one of the reasons I believe this is a future prophecy, and I believe it's a very strong reason to believe this is a yet to be fulfilled prophecy. It says, "Look, the city of Damascus will disappear. It will become a heap of ruins. The towns of Ararar will be deserted." Now these are towns in Israel. Modern day, they exist within Jordan. If you look on maps, assuming that some of these biblical maps that are put out today are true and in the right place. But again, we're looking at these areas of Syria, Jordan, the West Bank, areas that we just read about in Psalm 83. "Flocks will graze in the streets and lie down undisturbed, with no one to chase them away. The fortified towns of Israel will also be destroyed." And unfortunately, that's something that when a lot of people talk about the destruction of Damascus, they tend to forget that part, right? So this is more than the destruction of Damascus that takes place here. Israel is also hit severely damaged as a result of this future conflict. It says, "The royal power of Damascus will end. All that remains of Syria will share the fate of Israel's departed glory, declares the Lord of heaven's armies. In that day, Israel's glory will grow dim. Its robust body will waste away. The whole land will look like a grain field. After the harvesters have gathered the grain, it will be desolate, like the fields in the valley of Rephaim after the harvest. Only a few of its people will be left, like stray olives left on a tree after the harvest. Only 2 or 3 remain in the highest branches, 4 or 5 scattered here and there on the limbs, declares the Lord, the God of Israel." So, guys, this paints a very sobering picture of damage done to the nation of Israel. And that's why I say people should not jump to conclusions about a clear, overwhelming victory. I pray and hope that that's what happens. I do not want to see this, but this is what we're reading in the Bible. It says, "Then at last the people will look to their Creator and turn their eyes to the Holy One of Israel. They will no longer look to their idols for help or worship what their hands have made. They will never again bow down to their Asherah poles or worship at the pagan shrines they have built. Their largest cities will be like a deserted forest, like the land of the Hivites and Amorites abandoned when the Israelites came here so long ago. It will be utterly desolate. Why? Because you have turned from the God who can save you. You have forgotten the rock who can hide you. You may plant the finest grapevines and import the most expensive seedlings. They may sprout on the day you set them out. Yes, they may blossom on the very morning you plant them, but you will never pick any grapes from them. Your only harvest will be a load of grief and unrelieved pain. Listen, the armies of the many nations roar like the roaring of the sea. Hear the thunder of the mighty forces as they rush forward like thundering waves. But though they thunder like breakers on a beach, God will silence them, and they will run away. They will flee like chaff scattered by the wind, like a tumbleweed whirling before a storm. In the evening, Israel waits in terror, but by dawn, its enemies are dead. This is the just reward of those who plunder us, a fitting end for those who destroy us. So here we have, I believe, again, an invasion of Israel, an attack on Israel. God intervenes. I do not believe this is talking about Ezekiel 38:39, in which God does intervene as well. And we'll look at exactly why I think this is connected to Psalm 83, because here we have Psalm 83, verse 13. Oh my God, scatter them like tumbleweed, like chaff before the wind. And then we read in verse 13 of Isaiah 17. So verse 13 in both cases. But though they thunder like breakers on a beach, God will silence them and they will run away. They will flee like chaff scattered by the wind, like a tumbleweed whirling before a storm. Same language is used in both verses. Again, Psalm 83 is a prayer. God, do these things to our enemies. Those who are boasting about the destruction of Israel, we don't care if their God is there. We're going to come take the land for ourselves. And then here we have God answering that prayer. But in the midst of that, we have widespread destruction within the land of Israel. We have Damascus ceasing to be a city. And again, Damascus has sort of dropped out of the headlines since the Assad regime was overthrown. We don't hear much about that anymore. But there are still a lot of enemies of Israel residing in Syria and residing in Damascus. And we very well could see a move for all of these forces to coordinate and have a coordinated attack on Israel, even if we know that attack will fail, that this conflict is essentially over, that Israel has weakened its enemies to the point where there's no use in fighting anymore. Same thing happened in World War II, and we saw the Battle of the Bulge. So I think we're likely to see something similar to that take place in this conflict today. And again, God willing, we'll write a little bit more about that in tomorrow's Substack and what Israel may face in the weeks ahead. Again, all of this goes out the window. If the Iranian regime is overthrown tomorrow, well, then we could go straight to the piece of Ezekiel 38:39. But then you have to ask, well, how do Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17 fit into this timeline? Well, maybe I'm wrong and they're not prophecies. But I believe they are. I believe that, again, Damascus continues to be a city, the longest continuously inhabited city in the world. And so I would expect to see this intermediate step where Iran is able to strike back. And then we have a escalation in the Middle East. The timeline of this, I'm not sure of. Are we talking weeks? Are we talking months? But in the aftermath of that, I believe we will see the conditions put in place that we read about in Ezekiel 38, verse 11, where we had this state of tranquility and peace that leads to Israel's ultimate surprise during the Ezekiel 38-39 Gog of Magog invasion. So those are my thoughts on what the prophetic implications are of this war we're seeing. Now, some of those attacks that we could see, we talked about it's not just a battle of the bulge type scenario where some of these proxies haven't been fully defeated and they come forward with a coordinated assault. That's one thing we could see. We could continue to see prolonged rocket attacks, missile attacks, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles getting through the Iron Dome and hitting Israel and causing damage. We could see that for weeks or even months ahead if the Iranian regime continues to hold power, because they can continue to be supplied with weaponry by China, by Russia, by Pakistan. There are a number of allies that Iran has that have an interest in preserving the current Iranian regime because of the benefits they have in that relationship. Russia is not going to want to see a pro-Israel, pro-United States, Western, pro-NATO government in Iran right to its south. They're not going to want to see that. China gets a large portion, a substantial amount of oil from Iran. They're not going to want to see the regime fall. So they're going to be supplying that regime as long as it can maintain power. It can continue to fire these missiles into Israel, as well as harass shipments in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, which I believe is coming. So on Saturday, we talked about that specifically in this video right here. This was titled, "If This Is Really Happening, Get Ready for a Global Crash." And yes, we're seeing signs the scenario is about to play out. Now, this is a video that's, the Saturday videos are for premium subscribers on the Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. That means they're paid subscribers. That's how we pay our bills here in the Gillette family for about 4 months now. This has been a full-time endeavor. And so really the only way any cash comes into our family is through these subscriptions and through donations and the kindness of people giving us donations. So I would encourage you, if you want to support this channel, head over there and become a premium subscriber, help support us. However, that said, if you want to be a premium subscriber, but you're on a fixed income, you're facing financial hardship, you can't do that, it would be a big hardship to do that, please do not become a premium subscriber. Instead, message me directly on Substack. You can do that at substack.com/@BrittGillette. You'll find my profile there. Click on these dots, and you can send a direct message to me. Let me know that. We will be glad to gift you a free paid subscription. We don't want anyone to miss out on the content here due to financial considerations. God will provide enough subscribers to take care of us. We're confident in that. We know that together we're all Christians, brothers and sisters, and we'll help support each other as we go through these times. So if you want to do that, head over to brittgillette.substack.com where you'll find this. There we talked about several things that then have, several of those intermediate steps we talked about have already transpired. So this video, recorded it on Friday. We had a trip to make on Saturday. So this went up around noon, I think, on Saturday. And one of the things I talked about was, well, if the United States enters the war, then it takes away one of the pillars that's holding Iran back from harassment of shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Because to do so, once they begin doing that, if they move to shut the Strait of Hormuz, the United States would certainly enter the conflict. That's a red line that has been crossed. Well, the United States has now entered the conflict. And I believe it's been made clear by the United States and Israel at this point that they want to see regime change. That's the outcome they're seeking. So from the Iranian regime standpoint, well, this is a matter of survival. They're a cornered animal. They're going to use every option at their disposal to push back against this. And probably the best option at their disposal would be to harass these ships in the Red Sea, fire missiles, fire drones, all these things at unfriendly ships in the Persian Gulf. I just said Red Sea. I meant to say in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. We'll let Russian ships pass through. We'll let Chinese ships pass through. But American ships, European ships, we're gonna fire missiles. We're gonna fire drones. We're gonna do everything we can to raise the price of oil in the international markets, make everybody in the world feel the pain of that. And then we're going to go on a PR campaign of saying, this was brought to you courtesy of Israel and the United States. As soon as they stop, as soon as you pressure them to stop their attacks on Iran, and you stop them from pushing for regime change, well, we'll stop our harassment of shipping in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. So I believe that's what's coming. As part of that, and what we talked about in that Saturday video, was if that happens, then we're almost certain to see a financial crisis as a result and the triggering of a black swan event that will crash global markets. Now, again, since we put out that video on Saturday, we've seen the United States enter the war. We saw the Iranian parliament yesterday voted to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, ultimately, that's going to be the Ayatollah's decision. I would be absolutely shocked if they do not do that, if that's not the option they choose. And so make sure you're aware of what's going to happen. Again, over on the YouTube channel yesterday, we did a live stream last night. So if you missed that, if you weren't aware of that, you can go check that out. We talked about exactly how they would go about doing this. And of course, I got a whole bunch of comments late yesterday on the Substack video from Saturday saying they just made this announcement that they're going to do this. So these things are happening. So again, if you become a subscriber over at the Substack, my hope is that I'm able to do a lot of this information work gathering and be able to distill all of this information for you to serve you so that you don't have to do that yourself. And you can learn a lot of these things before they appear in the news headlines. But make sure to head over to the live stream from last night. Check that out. That's available on YouTube. I'll pin a link to that at the top of the comments to this video so you can go check that out, because we talked about how they would go about this, things that they would do, options at their disposal. Talked about a whole number of different nuances of the conflict moving forward, and especially the fact that this is not over. It's not up to Israel and the United States to simply say, well, we've achieved the objective of bombing these facilities. We believe that these nuclear facilities are no longer operational. Therefore, this conflict's over. The war's over. Well, they may think that, but if Iran decides, no, it's not over, then it's not over, and we have a prolonged conflict, a prolonged war. So that's what we very well could be looking at. It appears that that's what we're looking at. So make sure to head over and check that out. Also, on Wednesday, we're going to have our Bible Prophecy Roundtable. We do these generally on a monthly basis. And so that will be not at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we normally do. We had some scheduling conflicts, so 7:30 will be the start time for the Prophecy Roundtable this Wednesday. That will be me, John Haller, Scott Townsend, Patrick Wood, and David Bowen is joining us this time. So make sure to check that out. Hopefully you'll find that very informative as well. So guys, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. What do you think is the prophetic significance of all that we're seeing? What do you think will happen next? Let us know in the comments. God willing, I'll see you on Wednesday.